You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
Welcome into RBLR Lightning. My name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me is my good friend and co-host, Matt Cannon. Matt, Lightning hockey is back, and it's officially back. We got the preseason rolling. We got preseason games to talk about. I'm so excited. How you doing today, my friend?
The enthusiasm is real, Jake. I'm right there with you. I love the intro. I love the energy so far, just around you, around the team. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be back, excited to be rolling with some Lightning hockey, despite, some of these preseason outcomes, but it's just that. It's preseason. I'm just excited that we are back and rolling.
100%. I'm right there with you. Let's not beat around the bush either. Let's jump right into it and talk about some of these preseason games. So for those of you that don't know, the Lightning officially have their preseason schedule underway. They have played a total of 3 games, as one of them was postponed due to Hurricane Ian. Now, a couple of notes with that is they had the 2 home games they were supposed to play. Both of those got postponed due to the hurricane, and then they were going to remake them, and then they scheduled another game in Nashville, but that one wasn't technically a part of the makeup, and now they said they've canceled those 2 games. It was kind of weird and all over the place, but at the end of the day, all you need to know is that the Lightning technically did lose 1 preseason game. They played 3 so far. They've been on a large break, and we have some more preseason games coming up after this show. And our thoughts and prayers to everybody as well that was affected by Hurricane Ian, everybody down there in Fort Myers. We have some links down in the description for this episode where you can go donate to help people out for hurricane relief. There's tons of different ways to donate as well. So go do some research, figure out how you want to support people in any way you can, if you're able to. We really... I know those people appreciate it too. So if you need a place, though, links in the description, check that out. But we're thanking everybody there, all those Lightning fans and everybody down there in Fort Myers and all the places affected by Hurricane Ian. But starting off with the preseason games, Matt, let's talk about the first game that we had, which was against Carolina on September 27th. The Lightning unfortunately lost that one by a final score of 5-1. Matt, did you get a chance to watch that game?
I was patchy on it. I was a little bit busy, but I managed to, watch some of the more depressing parts of the game. But I managed to catch some of it. I didn't think the score was as bad as we looked throughout the game. It's great seeing Nemesnikov get the one and only goal. Even if it was a little bit of an ugly goal, it still counted. I managed to catch parts of it, and then I did also watch the entirety of the. Was it the 1-0 shutout against the Preds a couple days later? So,
well, and the thing I'll say here is the important thing to remember when we're talking about these preseason games, and I'm not saying this just because we've lost all 3, but the score doesn't matter. Preseason is looking at the rookies and some of your veteran guys and saying, okay, who is going to step up for us this year? Who's going to be that rookie that has that breakout year? What do we have here in our prospect pool? That's what it's an individual performance that you're looking at, not really a team. Of course, you would love to get some preseason wins and rack that up, but this is really an individual performance-based thing and seeing who performed well. And somebody that I thought did really good in this first game, despite the score, was Legacy. He looked fantastic, I thought. He stopped 41 of 46 shots. That's a lot of shots to face in a preseason game especially. A lot of the goals weren't really on him too much. There were a lot of power play goals in this game as well. Specifically, 3 of them were power plays. And he made some great saves under a lot of pressure as well. So I was really impressed with Legacy in this first game. Matt, your thoughts on him?
Legacy was really good. I saw a couple of people kind of saying like, "Oh, he was awful," blah 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 blah. I just don't think that the defense was really there to help him. There were a lot of mad scrambles and chaos situations that he managed to kind of bail them out. Obviously, letting 5 goals in is not pretty, but at the same time, he faced 46 shots, something like that. I mean, I thought he played rather well for what his forwards and defensemen, kind of brought for him. I was impressed, but at the same time, he is not even close to sniffing the backup job or even a starting job. I will say I've liked his play a lot better than Hugo's play so far. As far as other players that I enjoyed watching or thought kind of stood out to me is Cole Kepke. I think I'm pronouncing that right. That guy's got some wheels. He's pretty quick. He had a couple of good chances. I think he only registered. I think he got an assist in that game as well on one of the on the lone Nemesnikov goal. But he showed some real promise. I'm not quite sure. I can't quite tell you if he was one of the guys that got cut. I think he's still part of the training camp roster.
He is still here. He is
Okay.
still here. Yeah. And we'll get into more of that in just a bit here, but you're right. He is one that a lot of people have been impressed with and thinking that might make that lineup. But going back to Legacy real quick, just to wrap up and put a bow on that, I'm right there with you. The thing to remember too is in that Carolina game, Carolina played a ton of starters in that game. So he was basically playing an NHL lineup. And he, again, as you mentioned, he's not going to be the backup this year. We still have Brian Elliott, who we'll also get to in a different game as well. But he was really good. It's good to see that some of your Syracuse Crunch guys are playing well. And that tells you as well, maybe when Brian Elliott eventually does retire, he's a guy that could step up and become that backup. I don't know if he'll be the next Andre Vasoleski by any means, but he's definitely showing some promising signs, especially in that preseason game. So I liked that from him. I do want to talk about quickly, Matt, is the penalties. And this is something, I think we've talked about this before, and I don't know, it's just a Lightning thing or if it's a John Cooper thing, but the Lightning take so many penalties. They took specifically 5 in that first game against Carolina, which is not great. They had 4 in the second game against Nashville and then 6 in that third game. So the young Bolts, just like the older Bolts, love to take a parade to the penalty box, and I don't know what's going on. And with that, we got to see the penalty kill a lot. It had its moments, but overall needs some work for sure. And, again, we're kind of trying to look at individual player performances. Nobody really stood out there in the penalty kill, but hopefully that will improve as we get closer here to the regular season.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It could just be John Cooper style hockey, but last year we were top 3 in penalties or penalty minutes, I believe. But we were also pretty high up in penalties drawn as well. That was not the case in these couple of games. I think they were awfully skewed to penalties taken. And again, yeah, you're correct. The power play didn't look too great as well, but it's hard to get anything going when you're just putting yourself short here, there, and everywhere. So it could just be the rough and tumble kind of style hockey that they're playing, but it's just hard to get anything going when you're playing like that.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Moving on to that second game, though, so where the Lightning would go and play in Nashville. And again, this game taking place in Nashville because of the postponements. Another brutal loss for the Lightning. Unfortunately, they fell by a final score of 2-0 in this game. So not as bad in terms of score, but Brian Elliott was the goaltender for this one. I thought he was really good in this game as well, only letting up 2 goals. Again, he was under a lot of pressure in all these different scenarios because the Lightning weren't playing well. The biggest issue I had with this game, Matt, before I get to my positive from this one, was the power play. We saw Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, Victor Hedman, Braden Point, all the superstars out there for the power play. And again, it's preseason. These guys are just getting warmed up and they're getting ready to go. So there's absolutely no reason to panic whatsoever. These guys aren't putting their foot all the way down on the gas yet. But the power play was definitely not good in this game. They went 0 for 4, which is not something you love to see, even though it's preseason.
And not to mention, one of those was a double minor as well, with extended
That's right.
shifts from that top unit. From what I saw is that, not that they were trying to be too fancy and making the perfect play, which we kind of see them do rather often in the regular season, but they just kind of looked a little lazy. Again, you got to remember that these guys, they're not fighting for jobs whatsoever. They are, they're top level AAA superstars in this league, like, Kucherov and Hedman and Stamkos. They have no reason to fight for their jobs whatsoever. So they can be a little loosey-goosey and try to make these perfect plays. But again, it wasn't there. They got close a couple of times on that, on the double minor.
They did have a couple good chances, yes.
Kevin Lankinen made a couple of good saves, but I want to say there were one or two after that. I think that was the second power play of the game. Then it just kind of went all out of sorts. There was really kind of nothing going on after that. I'm not sure what it was, but again, I think it's just preseason laziness. Again, they've had the shortest offseason tied with the Avs. They're going to be a little bit rusty. They're not going to be quite as connected as everybody else. They haven't had as much time to really rest, even though, it has been an entire offseason. It's still, you're shaking off the rust. I believe that was Kucherov and Point's first game, and I think Hedman as well. I think Stamkos played the first game, did he not? I could be wrong.
I think that was all of their first games, if I remember correctly.
Here I go again saying I don't know.
You're right, though. You're right. For these guys, they're not competing for jobs, and you got to think they're playing a full 82-game season. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So this is like the little jog, right, before they get ready to take off full speed for that first game when they play the Rangers coming up on opening day. So they have to get their feet under them. I think it's frustrating where you see the fans start to complain a little bit and be frustrated is that we've been waiting for Lightning hockey all this time. And even though it was a short off season and we're a big spoiled fan base, but we're like, yes, hockey is back. We finally get to see our boys. Oh, they lost 2-0. Oh, they lost 5-1. Oh, they lost 7-1. It's like, what's going on? I just want to see some goals. Come on, man.
I know.
I think that's what it is a little bit. I don't know about you, Matt, but I think that's how some fans feel sometimes, and that's where that frustration comes from.
No, I completely get that because, I'm following a lot of the, NHL pages, and I'm seeing some highlight reel goals from, superstars, and I'm just seeing a bunch of these beautiful plays being made, and I'm like, boy, I wish I could see some of that in lightning blue or white, even. I really white, with none of these home games. But again, I am missing out a little bit. But at the same time, we've got at the very least 82 games to see more of that. So I will bide my time. I'm not in any kind of rush. And again, going back to these preseason slumps and whatever, if there's anything that I can take away from last year is the fact that the Lightning don't even put 100% effort in the regular season. I mean, how many times did we come in this video call and say like, they just didn't seem like themselves, and just you felt like they could have done a little bit more in the moment. Game one of the playoffs. Game one was a little bit rough, but again, once the playoffs started, you could tell they were all effort all the time. Some games didn't go their way, and some games they were just absolutely dominant. Again, that's one of the things that I did learn last year is that when they have to, they will put everything into it. They will put it on. When the pressure's on, they will. So again, I'm giving them all the slack in the world. They have proved me wrong at pretty much every single turn ever. I'll cut them a break this time. It's preseason.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fair. Fans just want to be like, Carolina when they see their new guy and Brett Burns scored 2 goals, and they're like, oh my goodness, look at Brett Burns. He's the best player in the NHL. And we're all sitting here, okay, guys, it's preseason. Let's calm down a little bit. All right. It's funny. It's all fun though. It is preseason. Regular season is when it officially counts. I did say I wanted to give a positive from this game. One player, and I don't know about you, Matt, but I was really, really impressed with Sean Day. He was unfortunately cut and set back down, which we'll get into in just a minute, but I liked what I saw from Sean Day. He also played in this next game that we're going to talk about too. And he didn't have any like crazy stats or anything. He didn't score a bunch of goals, but I thought he was a consistent defenseman. It's one of those things kind of like Eric, Cernak or Jan Ruda when we had him. It's that you almost don't notice him, which is a good thing for a defenseman. That's how I kind of felt about Sean Day, but I still heard his name come up a couple times when he was like taking a shot from the point or making a good defensive play. I really, really liked Sean Day. I'm very high on Sean Day. You can bookmark this episode and either come back to it and call me a fool when Sean Day doesn't work out, or we can come back to it and say that I'm a genius when Sean Day becomes the next Norris Trophy winner. But I really like Sean Day. Matt, your thoughts on him?
Well, do you know the Sean Day story? Like, do you know who he is?
I do not.
Okay, well, it's a little bit of a roller coaster. I'm going to go off on a quick little tangent here, but do you know?
Go for it.
Generational talents like Connor McDavid, yes, he's one of them, but also superstar caliber players like John Tavares, like Aaron Ekblad, players that are pretty much slotted to go first overall in North America, at least. I think it's pretty much just Canada in the CHL, the Junior League, Canadian Hockey League. If you are just above and beyond everybody else, in your age group, you can submit to be labeled as an exceptional status player. So it only gets handed out every couple of years to players that are just superstar caliber, like Connor McDavid, John Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, and just people that are going to go first overall or, somewhere in the top 5. You are exceptional. So you can apply for that position. And Sean Day, actually, I believe he was drafted in 2014, I want to say. He was granted exceptional status. So, again, they do not just hand this out to anybody. There's a little bit of, controversy with it. Apparently his parents really, really lobbied for it. Essentially, it just grants you status to play above your age level. So, again, you have to be a really, really fantastic player to gain this status. He was granted it, and then something along with his development, he kind of hit a peak and then just kind of stopped developing. I remember he was drafted by the Rangers, I want to say, and somehow slipped to the second round. He showed up to camp like overweight, and he really just kind of derailed his career, never kept developing, and just kind of bounced around the minors and even stints elsewhere outside the NHL and AHL. And I believe the Lightning picked him up in the off season before the 2021 season and, found a home with the Lightning. He's played well. He played in Orlando and he's played in Syracuse. He played a couple of games with us last year as well. I think he scored at least 1 assist. It's just kind of a crazy story how somebody can be so highly touted and then just completely forgotten about when you're comparing them with Connor McDavid's, Aaron Ekblad's, John Tavares. There's a couple more names, but those are kind of the biggest ones on there. To me, that's just kind of nuts. I'm sorry, I'm done with that tangent. I went on a little bit too long, but
no, it was a good tangent. Honestly, I'm rooting for Sean Day more now.
It's just crazy because everybody seems to forget that. At one point, he was one of the most, sought after, highly touted prospects in the league, and then just kind of vanished into nothing. Just because I guess he didn't develop right, didn't take care of himself or whatever, and now he's really just trying to find himself a home, a consistent job in hockey. I like him. I liked him last year. He was to your credit, he was one of those guys where you're not saying his name, you're not really noticing him, and as a defenseman, especially playing middle or bottom pair minutes, that's all you can really ask for, is to not notice him, not be like, oh, well, somebody just blew past him there, fumbled the puck here, whatever it may be. I agree with you there. He didn't impress me, but he was definitely solid in his role. So I appreciate you bringing his name up, and I appreciate you recognizing exactly, what he was there for.
Yeah, and you're right. He wasn't. He's not going to win the Norris Trophy next year. No. I mean, I'm overhyping it there, but I did like him. I thought he was good. He unfortunately is not going to be on the opening night roster, but I think he's somebody that we could definitely see in the regular season if the Lightning have to deal with injury issues. I think he's one of the top call-ups for the Lightning, I would imagine. We'll have to wait and see exactly how that plays out. But moving on to the third and final game that we've played so far in the preseason.
Do we have to?
Yes, we do, Matt. I know it was a tough one with the Lightning losing by a final score in 7-1. It was a brutal night all around. Really, there were no positives from this game, so we'll go quickly through it. But Matt, you mentioned earlier that it was Alnefelt that was in the net for this game. I feel for the guy. I wanted him to do well. He's had a couple of flashes there. I think he had a good game in the as well, but not good in this preseason game. And it was just an off night, I guess you could chalk it up to. But Nashville really took it to the Lightning in this one.
I mean, Nashville pretty much had their entire NHL roster this year, or for this game. And I do want to tell you, Nashville's a sleeper team this year. I know I'm kind of going off again, but I think Nashville's got a very, very underrated team this year. And how many NHL guys? 3. I know Hagel was in. I think Nick Paul was in. But we essentially had Syracuse out there. And I don't know. I like Hugo as a person. I know he was drafted rather high for a goalie, and he's got these rather high expectations as well. But from what I've seen, I'm not very impressed. I know he's got a good record at the AHL level, but his couple call-ups this past year, I guess we're in the new season now. But his couple call-ups, I think he only played 2 games for us when we were dealing with all the COVID issues. He just did not look very good, and especially in this game, there were a couple of goals that just really had no business getting by him. Again, I don't think the help was all there. He was facing essentially a 90% NHL roster, but I don't know. It's rather difficult for me to make excuses this time around.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You want to see him succeed. The good news for the Lightning, though, as we mentioned, Legacy, he's looked really good for the Lightning, so it hasn't been all bad at the goaltender position. The other good news, or the other good side of that, is that we have a goalie called Andre Vasoleski. I don't know if you ever heard of him, Matt, but he's pretty good, and he's going to help us out for the next couple of years. So we should be okay at the goaltender position. He was actually just rated the #1 goaltender in the new video game, NHL 23. So yeah, we're pretty good in that spot. So that's good to see. The next preseason game is coming up here tomorrow, I believe, against the Florida Panthers. There's 2 preseason games left. We will finally have a home game, and I'm sorry, it's not tomorrow. It's on the 6th. It's Thursday. But we will finally have a home game coming up on the 8th against the Florida Panthers to round out the preseason. So 2 more games to go, and expect to see a lot of the NHL players in these lineups. We're going to get really close to seeing who is going to be on that opening night roster and who is going to be able to make it to the NHL level and not be sent down. But we're getting close. We're getting ready to see what our team is going to look like here in these last 2 preseason games, which should be exciting. I wish I could get down there and go to one of those games coming up here. I know Lightning fans will be super excited. That preseason game, Matt, might feel like opening night. Everybody's been wanting hockey back, and we've only had 1 preseason home game.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope it's better than the banner night last year. At least the preseason game. I know
it wasn't pretty.
Everybody in the Bay Area is looking for. They're just craving Lightning hockey. It seems like 31 other teams have had their share of it so far, and again, we're missing out on 2, which I guess I'll take. Preseason games, they mean nothing. Less risk of injury, I suppose. But it's about time. Again, I got to withhold my tradition of at least going to every single, or at least 1 preseason game. So I think we're all a little overdue.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Now that we've talked about and recapped some of those preseason games quickly, I think the next thing we should look at here, I know a lot of people are wondering, who's left in training camp? Who's been sent down? What does it mean for these guys that have been sent down? And now we can't go through every player that was sent down. That would take us forever, and we'd be here all day. But a couple of the big ones, Alex Pierre-Boulet, Jamel Smith, and Sean Day they all cleared waivers today. So they were all sent down. And the big name there that I want to bring up is ABB. We've had him on the team for a couple of years now. And unfortunately, he's not going to make the opening night roster again. And if you remember, Matt, we talked about this on one of our off-season shows. I wrote an article over on the Bolt Report as well saying that this was kind of ABB's last chance to make a big impression and make a splash, as he's been up and down at the NHL level. He's been with the Kraken on waivers constantly, and unfortunately, he's been sent down once again. He wasn't claimed by anybody, so he will be with Syracuse for the Lightning, and will probably be one of the first call-ups if the Lightning have to deal with injuries. But the fact that he's not going to be on the opening night roster, I think says a lot for him. And for me personally, I think he might be done in heading towards the end of his career here.
I don't look at it with such a pessimistic view as you. You know, that's no shot against you or anything, but I was
going to say, Matt, wow, you got to call me out like that.
I'm going to try to look at it with a little bit more optimism in the fact that he's a very, very skilled forward. You know, he's not, complete enough to be an NHL regular, I guess. I know it's hard enough to make the Lightning as it is, and I just think there's not enough teams that know how good he is. I'm surprised he's gone unclaimed. I know Seattle claimed him last year and then waived him like 2 games later, but he had 2 points in those games. And then the Lightning used him very, very seldomly. I think he only managed to play like can't even call it a handful of games for us last year. But the way I see it is we've only got 2 injuries to our starting roster, and that's Anthony Cirelli and Zach Bogosian. And Anthony Cirelli is somewhere between, the second and third line. He's definitely got second line talent, but kind of a third line play style. But let's say if it was one of our, top guys like Stamkos or Kucherov, Braden Point even, to really go down, he could fit in those roles better than he could, let's say, a bottom 6 line. A lot of teams with, highly touted prospects, skilled prospects, they don't want to be playing them on those 4th and 3rd lines because those are predominantly checking lines, defensive lines, and that's just not the kind of player ABB is. He is a skilled scoring winger, and that's, why are you going to put him in these situations where he is just flat out not going to succeed and possibly even, hurt the team doing so. So I think until knock on wood, it doesn't happen. But let's say if, Kucherov or Stamkos or somebody, one of our, super mega superstars goes out, I think then ABB could be a viable option to replace just because he's just all offense, no defense kind of guy. And he could just slot in better on the top 2 lines than he could the bottom 2.
You make a really good point about we're trying to fill Cirelli's hole and not a guy like Kucherov, because you're absolutely right. ABB is a power play, scoring forward like a Nikita Kucherov. Not that he is Nikita Kucherov, but that kind of style.
He emulates it a little bit.
I want to bring up the Bogosian and Cirelli injuries, actually, because you kind of mentioned it there. So obviously, these are the players that we are going to be needed to replace for a short stint starting the regular season. And, I think it's interesting. We don't really talk about this kind of stuff, and it doesn't get talked about a lot. But I've seen a couple of reports now saying that Cirelli and Bogosian have both enjoyed having each other to lean on during their rehab here, as they're both dealing with similar injuries and similar timelines, so they can work together during their, they're the only ones wearing no contact jerseys. So they've had a friend through this process, which they have said has been a huge help to them, which I think is kind of interesting. And that's really good to hear that both these guys are working out together. They're pushing to get back. It sounds like they're doing very well, and they're only going to be out for a couple of weeks here, I think. So good to hear that both those guys are continuing to improve and you get back to full strength. But an interesting dynamic that you don't really think about when players have to deal with injuries is that they're basically not isolated, but, away from their normal routine. They can't work out with the guys the same. They can't do all the same things. And having that person with them, could be a huge boost and might even help you come back a little bit faster.
That is a good point you bring up. It's something I can't say I've ever even really considered. I'm sure it's crossed my mind a little bit. Like, yeah, it's got to be boring, sitting in the press box with, maybe your GM or whoever else, just, watching the game as pretty much a fan. When you'd love to be out there trying to, make your mark, make a difference on the game. But I guess it is, kind of a neat take to, have that time to kind of get, acquainted with somebody, kind of, connect on dealing with, similar or the same injuries, or even if they're different, just kind of connecting, bonding in a way off the ice. These are two of my favorite off ice people ever, like Zach Bogosian. He's such a beauty. And Anthony Cirelli as well. I mean, they're both great guys, great, on camera. But again, it's just an angle you hardly ever see, in sports. You never think about it. So, and I think that's a really interesting way you put it there.
Yeah, well, it's been reported on a couple of times, which is why I brought it up. So, something I never would have thought about, and something you wish you would have never seen, because you don't wish injuries upon everybody, obviously. But interesting news that I thought I would bring up here. I do want to talk about, though, who we are being impressed with here and who might have a shot at making the opening night roster. Who's left, basically, as majority of the guys have been sent down. I think there's 26 players left on the preseason roster as of this recording. So it's looking like, and Matt, you mentioned him earlier, Cole Kepke is going to be the forward for the Lightning. He has impressed a lot of people. He is up there in the third line in the line rushes for the practice for the Lightning. And then Nick Perbix, I apologize if I mispronounced that. I believe I have that right, but he has been the defenseman that has impressed the most people, and a lot of people are saying might be the one that makes an opening night roster. Hayden Fleury is also still with the team as well. That former top pick that was with the Seattle Kraken there for a little bit. Neither of those guys have jumped off the page for me, but clearly they've impressed John Cooper, which is the most important person that you need to impress. So it'll be interesting to see who gets that final spot, but something to keep your eye on in the last couple of games here.
Do you know when Perbix was drafted? I want to say he's a rather young player. I know, Fleury, he's been in the league for a good bit now. He's not been an NHL regular, but I want to say Perbix is only, in his early 20s at best.
I don't know off the top of my head.
He's 24 actually, but sorry, I just looked it up. Sorry to give you an open-ended question that I just answered, but
there you go.
But yeah, I'm at least I know Hayden Fleury, he's definitely still got some upside, especially with this team. But Perbix, I don't know enough about him. I didn't watch enough of him, but I'm, happy that, to see at least John Cooper and the coaching staff are recognizing, he's got something to give, and maybe he could be a decent replacement. As far as I know, I think Fleury will get the shot before Perbix just because he is a little bit more established, has played NHL hockey before, so.
And we should mention this too, with Bogosian's injury. Bogosian is sometimes that seventh defenseman as well. So right now it's Hedman, Foote, Sergachev, Cernak, Cole, Myers, and then Fleury and Perbix. So it's really who's fighting for that seventh spot. It would make sense to me that Cal Foote is actually going to be that sixth defenseman, and then it's probably either Fleury or Perbix that's going to be the seventh defenseman. I would believe. So we may not see a ton of them, although the Lightning do love to roll 11-7. That's something else they could do, Matt, that we haven't even discussed with Cirelli's injury, is the Lightning could go 11-7 until Cirelli is back. I don't see them doing that just because of Kepke. I think he's been impressive and he's made an impression on the coaching staff, so I don't think they'll do that. But it is something they could do and go 11-7 and then keep two defensemen in both Hayden Fleury and Nick Perbix.
That's something I never really even considered, actually. I don't, not that it's like a panic button type of move from John Cooper, but it's, something you won't see this early in the regular season. Of course, there are going to be plenty more injuries throughout the season, unfortunately, praying that there's not, but it's inevitable. So I'm sure we will see that at some point. But Do you really think Cal Foot's going to be slotted as the 6th defenseman? I'm going to take that back because on the line, the defensive lines that I've seen so far, I've seen him matched up with Hedman a lot. And
Correct. So he's
typically
technically
it seems like
playing up there.
And it seems like Hedman always has I'm using air quotes here, but the weakest defenseman as his line mate. For the last 2 years or so, it was Ruda, who was always kind of our whipping boy, even though I really grew to like him. He always seems like he has to kind of be the leader and lead by example, especially, in his pairing. So I really like that pairing, Cal Foot and Victor Hedman, and I think it could really, really benefit Foot's game. So yeah, again, I kind of did answer my question again.
Look at you, Matt. You don't even need me here. You're answering your own question.
Get out of here.
You're right, though, too. When we say 6th defenseman or, third line, it's more of a formality at this point. The NHL has changed a lot. Like, even calling people left wingers and right wingers and centers, like, most guys don't even have, they have a position, but when you watch the actual games, nobody really sticks to those exact positions either. So it's like a lot of this is kind of a formality. So technically Foot is the 6th defenseman on the list, but he does play with Hedman in most of these pairings that we've seen him. So, and he's another guy too that a lot of people are saying are hoping that he could make a jump this year and really impress people. And he's kind of got better by a little bit each year and was kind of okay last year. And I think a lot of people are hoping he's going to really make that step this year into being a solid NHL player throughout the season.
I hope so. And going back to nobody has positions, especially the Lightning. They really only have 2 wingers, and it's Nikita Kucherov and Pat Maroon. Everybody else is just where they fit best. They can play anywhere. Right. Pat Maroon and Nikita Kucherov, they're wingers down to the core.
When you look on Cap Friendly, how many guys do you see that are listed as center, left winger, and right wingers? Like, guys play a lot of different positions now. It's not what it used to be, which is interesting.
I know. I'll be listening to the Steve Dangle podcast or something, and they're always talking about, Kerfoot and the left wing spot and blah, blah, blah. They're very specific on who plays where on what line. And it's we just have 4 lines and you kind of play everywhere, everybody, Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov and
Mitch Marner was playing on defense.
Yeah.
He was taking reps at defenseman, which actually, is kind of smart because how many times do you see, teams when they pull the goalie or they only have 4 skaters and they're putting 4 forwards out there or 5 forwards for the power play. And then something happens and the forward doesn't know how to play defense. It's kind of smart if you think about it, because then you might be able to throw 5 forwards out on a power play, but you've got Mitch Marner back there who actually knows how to play defense a little bit. So it seemed crazy at first.
As much flack as he takes, he's a pretty decent penalty killer. He's really rounded out his game this last year, aside from being, a top tier playmaker. I'm interested to see how that will go. I can't imagine that experiment will last too long, especially because the Leafs.
It'll be very situational if it does happen.
Absolutely. But we also saw how well the 5-man power play or the 5-forward power play worked for the Panthers last year.
Spoiler alert, it did not work.
It worked in the regular season, but that's a completely different animal from playoff hockey.
Right. Absolutely. But for those of you who want to know who to look for in these next 2 preseason games, it's going to be Hayden Fleury, Nick Perbix, and Cole Kepke. Those are the guys that you should probably have your eye on the most. Gabriel Fortier is also kind of mixing in some of the lines. It's being reported as well, so maybe him as well. But those are the guys to watch in these next couple of preseason games here. Of course, when we come back for our next episode as well, we'll have all the coverage of that stuff too, talking about who impressed us and who officially made that lineup as well. But that's some in these next couple of preseason games. Getting away from the preseason here, Matt, I want to talk about The Athletic, who has been putting out their season previews, I guess we should call it, with all of their fancy models and stats that they've got, which, by the way, half of that always goes over the top of my head. It's really impressive what they're able to put together and all these different stats and numbers. But did you see the preview for the Tampa Bay Lightning that was put out by The Athletic?
It's been a little bit. You will have to jog my memory, but yes, I did see it. I know it was a little
So,
underwhelming for our standards.
yeah, so there's a lot on here, and I'll try to go through some of it. But basically, the Lightning were projected at 103 points for the season, 91% chance to make the playoffs, a 6% chance to win the Stanley Cup. Overall, they had an A- grade. I highly recommend going on Twitter and following all the guys that do this kind of stuff. Dom, who else does it? Shayna, I believe her name is on Twitter. They're the ones that post all those writers at The Athletic. So go check it out for yourself as well. But there were some interesting things in the sense of how they rated some of these players. And what they did basically is they gave these players a number from 0 to 5. And 0 is a fringe player and 5 being an MVP. They gave Brian Elliott a negative 0.1, which that's really weird to me because, Matt, we talked about this last year. Brian Elliott was really good for the Lightning, and a lot of people have called Vasoleski and Elliott the best goaltending duo in the NHL, largely due to Vasoleski, but still. Elliott at a negative 0.1, I think that's really, really low for a guy like him.
Yeah, I mean, there were, again, I am the biggest Vasilevsky fan on earth. He's, the only legitimate Lightning jersey I have that's not a fake. I'm 88 all the way, but there were a couple of times where I was like heading into the playoffs after game 1, I was never like, ooh, let's put Elliott in. He might be better, but I was like, what if? He really was solid throughout the year, and I think a lot of it, was it Dom's model that you saw this on?
I believe so.
Okay.
I think what they did is usually when they do this stuff, they combine multiple of each other's models to make this stuff.
Okay, because a lot of these models, they're not like, especially Dom Decisions, they're not at all, I don't know how to put this. They're not, he didn't sit down and do all of this. A lot of it is computer generated based on past scores, percentages, and blah 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 blah, all the numbers stuff that I don't know how to do. So he has essentially no control over this. This is just kind of an algorithm putting all these things together. And there's, it's still a lot smarter than me, but there's some things that just get past the eye test a little bit. I think, again, Brian Elliott was, one of the best backups in the league last year. He only got better throughout the season as well. There were not many games where he, lost it for us. I was flipping the table because Elliott's garbage. No, I was impressed, in and out every single game that he played. So I'm very surprised at that number. I think that's a huge discredit to him. And I'm kind of expecting the same from him this year, especially, from what we saw in that one preseason game where he really did hold down the fort rather well.
Well, and you're right in mentioning that, these are computer models. They don't get everything right. Part of the reason we love sports so much is that you never know what's going to happen. It's not a, calculated thing that you can easily predict. And it's fun to look at all these analytics and stuff, but you just never know. But I was definitely surprised on that one. There's a couple other ones that surprised me. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, was a 0 rating on this as well. Nick Paul, 0.4. What else on here? Pat Maroon, 0.3. That one, I guess, but still, Pat Maroon, the 3-time Stanley Cup champion. Like, come on, let's put some respect on this man's name. There were just a couple of ones that surprised me here, and I thought gave the Lightning a little less rating than they should have gotten. They still got an A- overall for all of their grades, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but couple of surprises there. We'll see how everything plays out in the regular season. And, the Lightning may be down low on the points projections, but you know what? Maybe that's more motivation for them to do even better this year.
I'd rather be underrated than overrated. Everybody loves
you're
an underdog.
100% right. That's a great way to put it.
Even though we're the farthest thing from underdogs.
I interviewed Johnny Greco over on the Bolt Report, And I asked him for his season prediction just as a fun thing to do at the end. And he was talking about how impressive it was for the Lightning to not have a hangover. Like most teams, they win the cup, kind of have a hangover a little bit, take a little while to get back, and then get back. The Lightning have not had that. And you're almost sitting here waiting for it to happen. And I think maybe that's what you're seeing here is that technically the Lightning get a little worse on paper because they do lose a couple of their guys from that Stanley Cup team. They're still extremely good, but, on paper, they have lost a couple of guys like Andre Palat, for example. So those computer models show us, not as good this year. But the difference for the Lightning is they've had such a good farm system, such a good scouting team, such a good coaching staff that they usually have, one of these guys that's rated on here, like Myers, a 0.1, could turn into a 2 or a 1.5 or whatever, and become a star player or a big point for the Lightning that helps them get right back to the finals again. And that's usually what's helped them year in and year out. And it's something that's really hard to predict. So we'll have to wait and see how the season plays out, though. Hopefully we knock the Athletic down and show them that we're still ready to go. I will say the Lightning are definitely still motivated. Just listening to some of the quotes from these guys, they're ready to go. They're excited to play. Heck, Corey Perry had like 6 fights in his first preseason game. So he's ready to go. But I'm looking forward to it. Matt, the season is right around the corner. Only 2 more preseason games to go, and then we will be playing the New York Rangers in New York for opening day. I cannot wait.
I'm excited, brother. I think we've ran a little bit long, so let's wrap up here. Again, don't forget to, if you are still with us here, don't forget to go down, look in the description, donate to some of these charities. If you can't do that, at least spread the message. One that I'm not sure if it's in the description or not, but the Florida Disaster Relief Fund. That's another big one, too. That's one that's personal to me, so...
We'll make sure it's down there in the description as well. All that stuff will be in there.
Perfect. So again, if you can't donate anything monetarily, the least you can do is spread the message. It'd be greatly appreciated. We've got hockey right around the corner. Jake, I guess I'm closing this time around. You got anything left to say?
You taking my job? What the heck,
I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to boot you out of here.
You're killing it, though. I do want to say this real quickly. There's only 7 days. We are 1 week away as of this recording for the NHL season. The Lightning still have not announced a jersey ad. I hope I'm going to knock on wood right now and I don't jinx it, but we have not announced an ad. So it is still a chance, boys, that we're not getting a jersey ad. I'm hyping it up. I'm excited. I'm ready
Speak
for
it
the
into
season.
existence.
No ads, baby.
All right. Well, again, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate the podcast as well. It helps us out a bunch. Thank you for listening. And lastly, go Bolts, 7 days away. Hoping for a great season. Take care, guys.
Go Bolts.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.